Welcome to the Scream Hotel. My name is Thanatos. I will be your guide here as we explore the rooms and the grounds of the hotel, and the stories that make this hotel very special in my heart. Well, that is, if I had a beating heart. Heartlessness is a condition of being dead. Sorry about that. Anyway, in our first story we take a journey with Mark and Rachel, as they are driving to California. There they have new jobs, sunshine, and a new life. Right now the sunshine seems a million miles away, as they run into some unexpected snow crossing the mountains. The weather won't be the only unexpected thing that happens on this trip.
We're never gonna find a place in this storm, Mark grumbled, peering through the windshield of their old Toyota Corolla. The wipers swiped furiously at the thick, white curtain of snow. Look, Mark. There's a light up ahead. Rachel's voice held a note of excitement that pierced the tension in the car. Sure enough, a solitary neon sign flickered through the blizzard, hotel. But the snow made it difficult to read the rest. It was a beacon in the frozen night, promising warmth and shelter from the relentless winter fury. The hotel looked like a relic from a bygone era, its once grand architecture now veiled by a thick layer of snow. Rachel's heart skipped a beat as they pulled up to the entrance. The place was eerily quiet, not a soul in sight. But the warm glow from the windows was too inviting to resist. They checked in with a sleepy clerk who barely looked up from his newspaper. "You're lucky to get the last room," he mumbled, handing them a tarnished key with a room number barely legible. The lobby was dusty and dimly lit, with an out-of-tune piano playing a melody that seemed to echo the hotel's faded glory. The room was small, with a musty scent that spoke of decades of disuse. Rachel couldn't shake the feeling of being watched as they settled in for the night. They decided to take a quick shower to warm up before hitting the hay. As Rachel stepped into the bathroom, she heard the faint sound of running water. She paused, listening intently. The noise grew louder, more insistent. "Mark, did you leave the sink on?" she called out. No response. She turned the tap off, but the sound continued. It was coming from the wall. Her heart racing, she stepped back into the room. "What's wrong?" Mark asked, concern etching lines across his forehead. Rachel couldn't find the words to explain, so she just shook her head and climbed into bed. They lay there in the darkness, the storm's fury outside seemingly mirrored by the unease within. As they drifted off to sleep, Rachel's mind was a tumult of unanswered questions. What was that sound in the wall? Was the hotel really as abandoned as it seemed? Her thoughts grew fuzzy, lulled by the rhythmic patter of snow against the windowpane. Suddenly, Rachel bolted upright, her heart pounding in her chest. A shadowy figure loomed in the bathroom doorway, silent as the night outside. Her scream lodged in her throat as she reached for the bedside lamp. With trembling hands, Mark fumbled for the light switch, but the room remained dark. The shadow remained, unmoving, watching them with unseen eyes. Rachel felt the cold seep into her bones, the very air in the room thick with dread. In a panic, Rachel reached for her phone to call the front desk, but it was dead. "The phone," she gasped. Mark nodded, his voice shaking as he grabbed the receiver on the nightstand. But all he heard was a mournful dial tone, echoing in the emptiness. The figure in the doorway grew more distinct, its features becoming clearer, yet no less terrifying. Rachel's breath hitched as she made out the silhouette of a woman in a tattered dress, her face a twisted mask of despair. They both knew they couldn't spend the night in this haunted room, but the storm outside was a wall of white, their escape blocked by the very elements that had brought them here. Rachel clutched the covers tight, her eyes locked on the figure that hovered at the threshold of their sanctuary. "We need to get out of here," Mark whispered, his eyes wide with fear. Rachel nodded, her breaths shallow and rapid. But the question remained, how could they escape the Scream Hotel with no way to call for help and the raging storm as their jailer? With a trembling hand, Mark fumbled through his pocket and pulled out his phone. "Thank God for this," he murmured, clicking on the flashlight app. The beam cut through the darkness like a knife, slicing the tension in half. Rachel watched as he swept it across the room, her eyes darting back to the bathroom doorway where the figure had been. As the light touched the shadow, it recoiled, dissolving into the wall. Rachel's eyes widened in disbelief as the space remained empty, the figure vanished. "Did you see that?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. They both nodded, the reality of what had just occurred setting in. The shadow had been a ghost, a silent sentinel watching over their room. They needed to get out, to find somewhere else to rest their heads before the night grew any darker. With a shared look of determination, they both swung their legs out of bed and grabbed their coats, their shoes left untied in their haste. Rachel's hand found the doorknob, turning it slowly, the click of the lock echoing through the room like a gunshot. The hallway outside was eerily silent, the only sound the muffled howling of the wind outside. They stepped out, the cold air of the corridor biting at their skin. The hotel felt like a tomb, each door a potential chamber of horrors. Mark's hand was tight around Rachel's, their footsteps the only noise as they approached the staircase leading to the lobby. The lobby was as they'd left it, the piano's melody now a haunting lullaby in the quiet of the night. The clerk's desk was abandoned, the newspaper still spread out, the chair pushed back as if its occupant had simply vanished into thin air. Rachel's voice trembled as she spoke, "We need another room." But the clerk was nowhere to be found. The only response to their pleas was the incessant ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, counting down the moments until their fate was sealed. Panic set in, a cold, icy hand squeezing their hearts. They were trapped. The storm outside raged, throwing handfuls of snow against the windows, a silent taunt to their plight. Rachel's eyes searched the lobby, looking for anything that could help them. And then she saw it. The staircase to the basement. It was their only option. They descended the creaking stairs, the light from Mark's phone casting jittery shadows on the walls. The basement was cold, the air thick with dampness and the scent of something long forgotten. But it was there, hidden in the shadows, that Rachel spotted the maintenance closet. With a sigh of relief, Mark pushed open the door, revealing an untouched, dusty space with a single, bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. "We can stay here," Rachel whispered, her teeth chattering from the cold. They curled up together on the floor, the warmth of their bodies a small bastion against the chilling presence that lurked in their room upstairs. As the hours ticked by, the storm outside seemed to mourn the lost souls of the hotel, its cries growing more mournful with each gust of wind. Exhaustion claimed them, despite the fear that clung to them like a second skin. But even as sleep tugged at their eyelids, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. And somewhere in the hotel, the ghostly figure waited, biding its time. Their eyes snapped open as the door above them slammed shut with a thud that echoed through the basement. Rachel's heart hammered in her chest, the sound a stark reminder that they were not alone. The figure from their room had found them. They huddled closer, the flashlight flickering as Mark's hand grew unsteady. They had to face it, they couldn't hide forever. As the ghostly form began to take shape in the doorway, Rachel knew that their night at the hotel was about to take a turn for the worse. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, Mark pushed himself to his feet, pulling Rachel up with him. They dashed up the stairs, the phantom's slow, deliberate movements giving them a semblance of a head start. Rachel's heart felt like it would explode in her chest, the fear propelling her legs faster than she thought possible. As they reached the lobby, the clerk was still missing. The once comforting warmth of the room was now a prison, the walls closing in around them. Rachel's eyes darted around, desperation fueling her search for an escape. The ghostly figure was gaining ground, its silent pursuit a chilling reminder of their dire situation. They sprinted down the hallway, throwing open doors to random rooms. Each one was a tableau of dust and decay, offering no refuge from the specter that followed. The sound of their own breathing filled their ears, mingling with the ghostly whispers that seemed to drift on the air. Their eyes fell upon a service elevator at the end of the corridor, a beacon of hope in the gloom. They stumbled towards it, Rachel's hand shaking as she jabbed at the button. The doors creaked open with the sound of ancient gears protesting. They tumbled inside, the metal screeching shut behind them just as the ghostly figure reached out a hand. The elevator jolted to life, the cables groaning in protest as it began to ascend. Rachel's eyes remained glued to the crack between the doors, watching as the figure faded from view. They were safe, for now. But as the elevator climbed, Rachel couldn't help but wonder if there was anywhere in this forsaken hotel that the spirit couldn't reach. The elevator shuddered to a halt, the doors parting to reveal the 5th floor. Rachel's eyes scanned the empty hallway, her breath coming in ragged gasps. They stepped out, their footsteps echoing down the corridor. As they stumbled into an empty room, the doors slammed shut behind them, the ghostly figure appearing in the reflection of the mirror on the wall. Rachel's scream was cut short as Mark shoved her aside, the door handle rattling with a force that seemed to shake the very foundations of the hotel. The ghostly woman's eyes bore into them, a silent plea that sent chills down Rachel's spine. It was then that Rachel realized this was no ordinary haunting. The woman's spirit was bound by some unseen force, a prisoner in this hotel just as they were. The figure reached out, its hand passing through Mark as if he were a ghost himself. Rachel felt a jolt of cold, a connection that was both terrifying and oddly comforting. The ghostly touch seemed to communicate something, a message of regret and sorrow. They had to find a way to help her, to free her from the hotel's grip. But first, they had to survive the night, trapped in the Scream Hotel with no one to hear their cries. The storm outside showed no sign of letting up, and Rachel knew that their only hope was to unravel the mystery that held this spirit captive. They had to find a way to leave this place, not just for their own sake, but for the sake of the lost soul that haunted its halls. "We can't just leave her here," Rachel pleaded, her eyes brimming with tears. But Mark's fear was palpable, his voice firm. "We need to get out of here, now." They rushed back into the hallway, the elevator's doors closing with a finality that sent Rachel's heart plummeting. The buttons to the lower floors were unresponsive, glowing red with malfunction. The elevator jerked into motion, seemingly of its own accord, heading upwards. With a jolt, the elevator stopped on the 13th floor, the doors sliding open to reveal a hallway that was a stark contrast to the others. The walls were papered with a pattern of screaming faces, their mouths open in silent cries. Rachel felt a shiver run down her spine. Their room was just down the hall, but the elevator had other plans. It began to ascend again, Rachel's hand shooting out to stop the doors from closing. "Wait," she shouted, her voice echoing through the deserted floor. But it was too late. The elevator continued its ascent, leaving them stranded on the 13th floor, surrounded by the echoes of anguished cries and the stench of despair. Rachel's mind raced, trying to piece together the story of this tormented soul, while Mark's focus was solely on escape. The elevator rattled and groaned, reaching a floor that didn't exist on the hotel's layout. The doors opened to reveal an endless corridor of doors, each one adorned with the same tattered dress as the ghostly woman's. Rachel felt a sudden pull, a connection she couldn't ignore. They stepped out, the coldness of the floor seeping through their shoes. Rachel's hand slipped into Mark's, his grip tightening as the elevator descended, leaving them in silence once more. The doors stretched into infinity, a labyrinth of untold horrors. Rachel could feel the presence of the woman's spirit, guiding them, begging them to listen. But Mark's eyes were on the elevator, willing it to return. "We have to find out what happened to her," Rachel whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm's mournful wail. "No, we have to get out of here," Mark insisted, his eyes never leaving the spot where the elevator had been. The tension between them grew as thick as the shadows that danced along the walls. Rachel knew that she couldn't abandon this ghostly woman, but Mark's fear was a living, breathing force, threatening to consume them both. The elevator chimed, the doors sliding open with a final, resigned sigh. Rachel took a deep breath and stepped inside, Mark reluctantly following. As the doors shut, Rachel pressed the button for the 2nd floor, their room, and the promise of their belongings. But the elevator had other ideas. With a jolt, it began to descend, the numbers on the panel skipping past their floor, descending into the bowels of the hotel. Rachel's heart sank as they plunged into the unknown, the spirit story unfolding before them like the pages of a book written in the language of fear.
Well, it looks like Rachel and Mark are stuck in the hotel. Stuck in a world that they do not understand. Will they be able to get out? We will find out in part 2 of Room 237.